Welcome to the Raised with Jesus podcast, 10 minutes every day where the life of Jesus meets yours. You've got your daily Bible reading for February 1st, 2020, and today we're looking at Judges chapters 6 and 7. If you're following along in the bookmark, I think I've got a typo there. It says Joshua 6 and 7 on the bookmark, but we had Joshua 6 just 2 days ago with the fall of Jericho. So today we're in Judges chapters 6 and 7, the account of Gideon. Again, the people of Israel committed evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. The hand of Midian was heavy upon Israel. Because of Midian, the people of Israel made hidden shelters for themselves in the mountains, in caves, and other hideouts. Whenever Israel planted crops, Midian and Amalek and the people of the east would go up against Israel. They would set up camp against them and ruin the crops all the way to Gaza, so that there is no source of livelihood left in Israel, not even a sheep, an ox, or a donkey. When the Midianites would invade with their herds of cattle and their tents, they were as numerous as locusts, so it was impossible to count them and their camels. This is how they came up against the land to ruin it. So Israel was laid low because of Midian, and the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. When the people of Israel cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a man, a prophet, to the people of Israel. This prophet said to them, "This is what the Lord God of Israel says. It was I who brought you up from Egypt, and I brought you out of the house of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of Egypt and from the hand of all your oppressors, and I drove them out before you, and I gave you their land. I said to Israel, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live. But you did not listen to my voice. The angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite. His son Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Gideon said to him, Please tell this, my Lord. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the wonderful acts our fathers told us about when they said, Is it not the Lord who brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us, and he has given us into the hand of Midian. The Lord turned to him and said, Go forward in this strength that is now yours, and you will deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you? He said to the angel, Pardon me, my Lord, but how can I deliver Israel? Look, my clan is the lowliest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. But the Lord said to him, Surely I will be with you, and you will strike down Midian as one man. Gideon said to him, If I have now found grace in your eyes, please offer me a sign that it is you who are speaking with me. Please do not leave this spot until I come back to you. I will bring my gift and set it before you. He said, I will sit here until you return. So Gideon went and prepared a young goat, and he made unleavened bread from a half bushel of flour. He put the meat into a basket and the broth into a pot. He then brought them out to the angel under the oak, where he presented them. The angel of God said to him, Take the meat and the unleavened bread and set them on this rock, and pour out the broth. So that is what he did. The angel of the Lord reached out the tip of his staff that was in his hand, and touched the meat and the unleavened bread, and fire came up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. Then the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, and he said, Oh no, it is the Lord God. Yes, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. You will not die. So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there, and he named it, The Lord is Peace. To this day it stands at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. On that same night the Lord said to him, Take a bull from your father's herd of cattle, the second bull, the one that is 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal. Then cut down the Asherah pole that is next to it. In its place, build an altar to the Lord your God the proper way on top of this stronghold. Then take the second bull, and send up a burnt offering using the wood from the Asherah pole that you cut down. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and carried out the word of the Lord. Yet because he was too afraid of the household of his father and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. When the men of the city got up early in the morning, they were surprised to see that the altar of Baal had been thrown down, the Asherah pole next to it had been cut down, and the second bull was being offered up as a sacrifice upon the altar that had been built there. The people were asking each other who did this. They searched and investigated until they concluded, Gideon, son of Joash, did this. So the men of the city said to Joash, Bring out your son, he must die, because he broke down the altar of Baal, and because he cut down the Asherah pole next to it. But Joash said to all those who opposed him, Will you contend for Baal? Will you save him? Whoever contends for him will be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, if someone broke down his altar. From that day on they called Gideon Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal contend with him, if he broke down his altar. Then all the Midianites and Amalekites and the people of the east gathered together. They crossed over to Israelite territory and set up camp in the valley of Jezreel. The Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. He blew the ram's horn, and the clan of Abiezer was called out to follow him. Gideon also sent messengers into all Manasseh. So Manasseh assembled behind Gideon. He also sent messengers into Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they came up to meet the others. Then Gideon said to God, If you will save Israel by my hand as you have said, look here, I am placing a woolen fleece on the threshing floor. If dew is found only on the fleece, but all the ground around it is dry, then I will know that you will deliver Israel by my hand, as you have said. And that is exactly what happened. Gideon got up early in the morning and squeezed the fleece and wrung out dew from it, a bowlful of water. But again Gideon said to God, Do not be angry with me, but let me speak just once more. Please let me conduct just one more test with the fleece. This time, let the fleece be dry, but let there be dew on the ground all around. That night God did that very thing. Only the fleece was dry, and there was dew on the ground all around. Chapter 7. Then Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, and all the people who were with him set out and camped by the spring of Harod. The Midianite camp was north of him, in the valley below the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, There are too many people with you for me to give Midian into your hands. If I did that, Israel would glorify itself at my expense, and say, My own hand has delivered me. So then make an announcement for the people to hear. Whoever is trembling with fear can return home and fly away from Mount Gilead. 22,000 people turned and left. Only 10,000 remained. The Lord said to Gideon, There are still too many people. Lead them down to the water, and there I will refine them further for you. If I tell you, this one will go with you, he may go with you. But if I say to you, this one will not go with you, he must not go. So Gideon led the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, Place everyone who laps water with his tongue as a dog would lap to one side. Place everyone who kneels down to drink on the other side. The number of those who lapped, those who put their hands to their mouths, was 300 men, while all the rest of the people knelt down to drink water. The Lord said to Gideon, With the 300 men who lapped, I will deliver you, and I will give Midian into your hand. As for all the other people, let each man go back to his place. The men who had been chosen took provisions in hand along with their ram's horns, but Gideon sent every other Israelite man back to his own tent. He kept only the 300 men. The camp of Gideon lay below him in the valley. That night the Lord said to Gideon, Get up and go down against the Midianite camp, for I have given them into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to attack them, then go down to the camp with your young attendant Purah. Listen to what they say. After that your hands will be strengthened to go down to attack the camp. So Gideon and his young attendant Purah went down to the sentry post at the edge of the camp. Meanwhile, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the whole army of the eastern peoples were spread out in the valley, thick as locusts, and their camels were more than could be counted, as many as the grains of sand on the seashore. When Gideon went down, he arrived, just as a man was telling his fellow soldier about a dream. He said, Listen, I had a dream. I dreamed that a round loaf of barley bread came tumbling over and over into the Midianite camp. It crashed into a tent and struck it, so that the tent fell down. It overturned the tent, and the tent collapsed. His companion responded, What can that be but the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the man of Israel? God has given Midian and the whole camp into his hand. So when Gideon heard the retelling of the dream and its meaning, he bowed down in worship and returned to the camp of Israel. He said, Get up, because the Lord has given the camp of Midian into your hand. He divided the 300 men into 3 groups. He placed a ram's horn into the hand of each of them, as well as empty jars with torches inside of them. Then he said to them, Watch me and do whatever I do. When you see me arrive at the edge of the camp, do whatever I do. When I and all the men who are with me blow our ram's horns, the rest of you, who are all around the camp, also blow your ram's horns and shout, for the Lord and for Gideon." Gideon and the 100 men with him went to the edge of the camps at the beginning of the middle watch, just after the Midianites had posted their guards. Gideon and his men blew their ram's horns and shattered the jars that were in their hands. All 3 groups blew their ram's horns and broke their jars. They held the torches in their left hands, and in their right hands they held the ram's horns that they were to blow. They shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Each man stood at his station around the camp. The whole Midianite camp started running, raised the alarm, and fled. When the Israelites blew the 300 ram's horns, the Lord turned the sword of each Midianite against the person next to him throughout the whole camp. The Midianite army fled up to Beth Shittah, toward Zerah, up to the border of Abel Meholah, as far as Tabath. Then all the men of Israel were summoned, from Naphtali, from Asher, and from all Manasseh, and they pursued Midian. Gideon sent messengers throughout the entire hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Go down to confront Midian. Seize the waters before them, all the way to Beth-barah and the Jordan." So all the Ephraimites who were called out seized the waters as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. They also captured Oreb and Zeeb, the 2 generals of Midian. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeeb at the winepress of Zeeb. Then they pursued Midian, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gideon by the crossing of the Jordan. This is the word of our God. A couple of takeaways from the account of Gideon. First of all, you see at the beginning how terrified, how scared, and how timid Gideon is. And I wish that had continued throughout his entire life. In the subsequent chapters, the people look to Gideon as their leader, and Gideon starts to perhaps become arrogant and forget the God who had saved him. And as he becomes more confident in himself or his own leadership or his own abilities in the army, he starts to offer incense to false gods. But as it stands right now, Gideon is the one who had to be encouraged all along the way, where God said, "Tear down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah pole next to it." Gideon has to do that at nighttime, and his dad is, gotta love this guy. Everybody's like, "All right, we narrowed it down. Gideon is the one who did this. Bring him out so we can bring justice against him, so we can kill him." And his dad, Joash, is like, "Come on, guys. Can't your God defend himself?" If he's really upset about Gideon tearing down his altar, then maybe Baal will just take care of him. Which is, fairly wise, I would say. A good answer, a diplomatic answer, especially when you're facing a mob that wants to kill your son. And God kind of speaks ironically that way when he's in the second half of the book of Isaiah. I don't know, around chapter 40 and 50, somewhere in there. He talks about this man who is making an idol. He goes out to the woods, he cuts down a tree, and half the tree he cuts up and uses for the fire, and the other half he carves into his God. And he builds it, and he's an excellent craftsman, and he makes sure to nail down his God so that he doesn't topple over. And God just kind of makes the comment, who is God like the Lord? Everybody else, there is no such God in the world. And that's what we see here, that there is no God like our God. The second thing is that God uses Gideon, and he cuts down this army of 32,000 down to 300. Sends 99% of the guys home, saying, "Okay, we don't need you." Against this army that is described in multiple ways as being overwhelmingly large. And God says, just give him the tiniest little group of men that's not even fit to be a raiding party. It's like the size of Abraham's personal army when Abraham, about 500 years previously, 600 years previously, had to go and rescue his nephew Lot. It's not a large group at all. But against overwhelming odds, God fights for his people. And that's the other part where this is mentioned in the book of Isaiah chapter 9, one of those readings that we have at Christmas very often. People walking in darkness have seen a great light, and kind of fast forward down to verse 4. You have shattered the yoke that burdened them. You have broken their bar on their shoulders and the rod of their oppressor, as you did in the days of Midian. Every boot that marched in battle and the garments rolled in blood will be burned. They will be fuel to the fire, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given. And perhaps that jogs your memory from Isaiah 9. And the point there is that in that prophecy, God uses this picture of this historical event of Gideon with his tiny group of people standing around as God fights for his people, as God defeats this overwhelming enemy. And that picture is what God uses for our salvation in Christ, that you and I stand around and watch as God uses this tiny little baby, this tiny little force, looks, just like this infant who is as helpless, but God uses him to defeat our overwhelming enemy of death. And so he says, every boot that marched in battle and the garments rolled in blood will be burned. They'll be fuel to the fire. Why? For to us a child is born, and the government will be on his shoulders. That there will be no more war. There will be no more worry. There will be no more need to fight. No more struggle against sin, death, and the devil, because Jesus has won. And so the historical account of Gideon, you could use that as an illustration for the account of Jesus saving us in the battle that we could not win. And yet God accomplished that victory through his own Son. God bless your day.